Hey there everyone, it's Todd from Guilla Games with part 3 of the Shrouded Aspect devlog. Now today I just want to talk about setting up a new project, because in the previous editions of the devlog we talked about the old project. Now we're starting to move into the new project, which is a Unity project. Now there's a lot of standard things that I do every time I start a new Unity project, so that's kind of what I'm going to cover. Not getting too much into the weeds about the specific the game itself. So the first thing you want to do is create a repository on GitHub or some other source control management system. I always use GitHub. It's I can't stress this enough. If you already know that what you're going to work on is a project that you're going to keep, not just something you're kind of experimenting with, the first thing you should do is just go to GitHub, sign up if you don't have an account. There's plenty of free tutorials on YouTube about it if you're not familiar with what GitHub is. So basically, it's just a way to back up your project to a server somewhere. So every time you work on something and you commit it, it gets automatically copied to the server when you push it. Now, this is basically critical if you're working on a team and multiple people are working on the same project from different locations. But even if you're just working on it by yourself, like I am, it's very important to have it in a source control system with version control, branching, and things like that, so that if you royally screw something up, you can back up and start over. You can branch off and try experiments with ideas, and if they don't work, you can just abandon them. If they do work, you can merge it back into the main branch. So definitely do that. And then create a new Unity project. For this particular project, I'm using the latest version of Unity, which is Unity 6 or version 6000 point something. Let me see, the current version that I have right now is 6000.0.1 F1, and I'm on a Mac. I'm on a MacBook Pro with the M1 chip. So this is the Silicon version of Unity for the Mac. I like developing on a Mac because it allows me to do iPhone, Mac, as well as Windows and Android. So it covers all the platforms. I don't think you can do that if you're developing on a Windows computer. I don't think you can do Mac and iPhone. So after I create a Unity project, one of the first things I always do is copy a bunch of standard functions and classes and code and libraries and things like that from a previous project, things that I know I'm just always going to use. And that includes like my sound system that I developed, my dialogue system, a loading screen, not the graphics for the loading screen, but just the functionality of like how to call it and how to how to show it, how to hide it, that kind of stuff. A tooltip system, and those are some examples. And then there's a lot of third-party libraries that I always use, like iTween for tweening. I use Anti-Cheat Toolkit, which is great for obfuscating variables that are in memory and stuff, so it makes it harder for people to cheat. Other things like a recycled list view, a simple zip, which is a library for zipping files or zipping data, and then you can either keep it in memory zipped or you can like save it to disk. And I use Secure Store for saving things to disk with encryption, and I use those together in combination, the zip and the Secure Store with Rising Star 2, to create save game files. That way the zip makes them as small as possible, and the Secure Store makes them so that people can't just open them up and hack them and change their save game files, at least not so easily. And then I have this other thing called Unity Shell Helper, which I use in Rising Star 2 for scripting builds. So what that does is I have a Python script that runs and does all kinds of build stuff after the actual build in Unity is finished. So it'll handle notarization for Mac builds and connecting to Steam and uploading the builds to Steam through SteamPipe. And so I have a one-click menu option to be able to do that, but the only way I can do that is by having Unity be able to call a Python script from within Unity. And then once I have a bunch of stuff in there, I have to determine the project structure. Now there's a lot of different ways this can be done, and partly is like what stuff is a prefab that gets instantiated, what stuff is in a scene that gets loaded. Do you load scenes additively and then manually unload them? Do you just add scenes not additively, which automatically unloads previous scenes? So there's a lot of decisions in Unity to make when you're deciding on your project structure. What I ended up doing here for Shrouded Aspect was I create a startup scene, which you can see here. Now the startup scene doesn't have much in it. All it has is a few things that are marked to don't destroy. What that means is the next time a scene gets loaded, these items that are marked as don't destroy will not get destroyed automatically. They'll just kind of live in their own little don't destroy scene within the game when it's running. You can see that in the editor mode when you're running it. And what I have here is my sound system, which is a global thing. So once it's created at its startup, the sound system controls playing all the sounds throughout the whole game, no matter what scenes are loaded. So that's why that's a global thing. And then I have a main canvas, which includes handling my loading screen, my dialogue system. Those are the main things. Other UI elements that are more kind of like game mode specific or screen specific have their own canvas in their own scene, the way that I set it up. So once this gets launched, there's a main script here, and inside the main script in the awake, there's all these initialize functions, initialize all kinds of data and other one-time initialization stuff at startup. And then in the start menu, the start function, which happens after awake, this is where it will load us into the main menu. But first it checks. I have this kind of hack for the editor. If I want to have it load straight into a certain scenario, like if I'm working on a certain scenario scene, I have it set up so that it'll automatically load that scene, so I don't have to click anything after I hit start. Otherwise, for normal flow, it will show the cutscene dialogue, and I can get more into the dialogue structure later, but it shows a dialogue that's basically a cutscene comes up, shows some of the story, audio, and then the callback for when it's finished calls cutscene finished, and what that does is call this function to load the main menu scene. The main menu scene is its own scene, which looks like this. It's got its own canvas. It's all just two-dimensional. It's just a UI, and you go from here. And then of course the main menu has its own script for handling button clicks and things like that. The scenarios are their own scenes, of course. So when you go from the main menu to there's actually one more scene in between, a hub scenario scene. This scene is going to handle staging, where you choose characters, but I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. That's for a future episode. So another thing I like to do at the beginning of the project is decide what kind of fonts I want. And of course I'm using Text Mesh Pro for the text system, and it comes with the default font, but I like to create this kind of structure here where I have a TTF folder for these are the TrueType font source fonts. They're not actually directly used in the game, but they're used to generate the Text Mesh Pro fonts. And what I do is I name the main font in an abstract way, like main UI. So that way it's not named after the font itself, because if I decide that I want to use a different font for the main UI, I don't want that font name to be the wrong name. It's much easier to update an existing font with a different source font and keep the main font name the same. And so I have main UI and ornamental. And I'm not sure how much I'm going to use the ornamental. Ornamental is kind of the fancy Gaelic one. It's hard to see with these. There's the standard font, and you can kind of see it in the main menu, I guess. See here. Yeah, so the zoom in on here. This is the main font, the main UI, and this is in small caps mode. And then this is the font that's the ornamental one, but this right here is a graphic that was created in Photoshop. That's so it can look fancier. After you create the fonts that you want, I like to create a lot of standard UI element prefabs, like especially buttons. Buttons with text on them, or just buttons that have an image on them, or toggles. Let me see here in my prefabs under UI. I have a button, and I have a toggle. I have these scroll views, horizontal and vertical. I'm not sure which one I'm going to use yet, or both. And then there's other various miscellaneous things, but the most common standard ones, like you need a button, you're going to use a toggle, you're going to have scroll views. So it's best to just decide on your look for that thing, at least a rough look right now, and create a prefab. Because later on, when you decide to change the look of it, you don't want to have to go throughout your whole project and change it on every instance of a button and every instance of a toggle and every instance of a scroll bar. You just go into the prefab, change it there, and it changes it globally throughout the project. So that's why it's important to do that early on. Okay, one thing you may have noticed here is there's a scenes menu here, and I was loading the scenes using this, and they're organized so that right now I only have 2 scenario scenes, and they're just works in progress anyway. They're not real. Under Hub 1. As I described before in a previous video, this game is structured so that there's multiple hubs. I think there's like 7 hubs, and each hub has multiple scenarios. So I just organized these scenes by hub so it's easy to find what I want to work on. And this whole menu here is simply an editor scene here where you can set up these functions to open whatever scene you want. So it makes it a lot easier than having to navigate in the project files, go in here and find what you're looking for, especially if you're working on something in another folder, like maybe you're working on some graphics and some Atlas sprites, looking at skills, and then you want to load a scene. Well, you don't want to have to worry about scrolling all the way down, finding the scenes folder, etc., when you can just go up here and do this. I'm actually surprised Unity doesn't have something like this built in, but I guess I make it easy enough to make custom menus. So that's how I get started on a new project here. Get the basic structure set up so that I can start working on scenarios and working on UI, and I get the sound system in there so I can add sounds, all the basic things like tweening, other basic scripts like making an object rotate or wiggle back and forth or scale up and down, just kind of in a loop. Various little things that are good to use in UI elements. It's all in there now. So now I can just like forge ahead and start working on messing around with some scenarios and getting started with the terrain first, and that'll be in the next episode. So tune in, subscribe. Oh, and I also do want to mention a while back when I was working on Rising Star 2, a couple of players in the community suggested that I start a Patreon, so I did that, and that was really helpful for people to help kind of support the development of the continued development of Rising Star 2. And after I stopped working on that 100% actively, I told people, cancel your Patreon subscriptions because I'm not focusing on it right now. Well, I'm going to be focusing on Shrouded Aspect now. So if you're interested in helping the development of this, please do sign up for Patreon. Totally not required at all. But I probably should set up some new tiers that are appropriate for Shrouded Aspect, because the tiers are kind of set up for Rising Star 2 right now. So take a look at it, but I'll probably add some new tiers soon. But all right, thanks for watching, and tune in next week when we start working on the terrain and other items in the scene.